really, if we want to balance our life as we go through, the third season of our life, whatever you may call it, it is the insulin and cortisol and the most powerful hormone in our body, oxytocin, that we have to address.
Welcome to the Learn Skin podcast with me, Dr. Raja.
And me, Dr. Hadar, where we discuss all things skin.
Join us as we delve into the art and science of skin health in today's episode.
Hey, Raja, can you say the thing I told you to tell them?
Of course. We are board-certified dermatologists. This podcast is meant for educational and informational purposes only and is not considered medical advice, nor does it serve as a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. All opinions shared do not express the views of Learn Health, Inc. Let's get to the good stuff.
Hey, Raja, how are you today? Oh, oops, Raja's not here. Where did he go? He disappeared. Hi, everyone. My name is Hadar Levtov. I'm here by myself. We sent Raja. He's been doing way too much research, seeing way too many patients. We send him to think about what he's doing and come back next episode. In the meantime, you get me and my esteemed guests. And today we want to talk to you about a topic that often is neglected, and that is menopause and hormonal changes that affect wellness in general and obviously the skin as well. And so for that, we have a returning guest. We have with us Dr. Anna Cabeca, who's an OBGYN. She now practices again in Dallas, just recently learned that she's back in practice. That's after an amazing career so far. She is triple board certified. She's a best-selling author of the Hormone Fix and Keto-Green 16 and Menopause. And she has had multiple appearances in various media, and she has her product line, and she is so accomplished that I'm just not going to go through the whole thing and embarrass her, but suffice it to say, she's the right person for the job. Dr. Cabeca, welcome to the program again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love your intro.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed our conversation last time. And so I'm really happy that you're back here. And, I was thinking about it when I was looking at our lineup and looking at topics we want to cover. And I realized that many people kind of have a sense of what menopause is. They kind of say, oh, this is that thing that happens. But how do you explain to people what menopause is? Because I think sometimes people don't really know how to define it.
Yeah, I think we've done a bad job in medicine and with nomenclature around menopause, for sure. But menopause technically is that period in a woman's life, which is 12 months after her last menstrual period. But it doesn't account for what if she went through 12 months of no period and then started her period again. So it's continues this perimenopausal journey, but technically, like from the ovarian standpoint, it's known of cessation of reproductive years. And the time before and around menopause, we use the term perimenopause. And then before, ovarian aging and adrenal aging, it's just premenopause. And then postmenopause is that day after the last, 12 months after the last menstrual period is considered postmenopause. So you can see where easy for men, okay, you're in andropause, like, even what does that mean? But just a way to say that you're aging and you're no longer reproductive.
Wow. And, I think it can be understated how much of an impact this must have on women in general. I mean, we're going to talk more about hormone physiologic changes, maybe skin changes, but even mentally, just to think, okay, this is something that was happening for the better part of my life, and now it's not happening. Can you talk about some of the experiences that women go through when they come to you psychologically, just to give kind of a background before we dive into hormones and such?
Well, I think the first thing I tell women when they come to me in this time period is menopause is natural and mandatory. Every woman will go through it. Suffering is optional. Suffering is optional.
Love it. Yeah. Isn't that true about life in general, right?
In general.
Things are mandatory, but suffering is optional. Love it.
Right. And so for women, there's so much confusion. What's happening to my body? I don't understand. How does this reframe my existence at this time in my life? Is there reframing that needs to be done? Rebranding. I'm always like, time to rebrand. I mean, what do you want to do? What's your biggest dream? Where's your passion? Look at it as your opportunity to just, play full on. But it is challenging because with the suffering piece, many women are just powering through this time period of their lives and not realizing there are many natural and integrative things we can do to optimize and to, really become symptomless in this transition time period.
Right. And, God bless you for holding the hands of so many women as they go through this process, which I can only imagine, being a dude myself, that it's really hard emotionally and probably alters many different aspects in your psyche. But now I want to talk about, obviously, menopause has to do with hormone balance, but we want to talk about how this may affect weight. And I guess the very first question is, what does one have to do with the other? These are reproductive hormones. How does that interplay with weight?
See, I think this is where we've gone wrong again in medicine because we focus on the reproductive hormones. We focus on estrogen predominantly for women in menopause, testosterone in men, progesterone a little bit, and maybe sometimes we address DHEA. And in fact, like for my studies and in my professional career, I recognize that these are the minor hormones. Really, if we want to balance our life as we go through the second half of our life, or, the third season of our life, whatever you may call it, it is the insulin and cortisol and the most powerful hormone in our body, oxytocin, that we have to address. And so this is why we see patients come in and say, Dr. Anna, Dr. Hadar, I've gained 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds without doing anything different. And I think it's really important to understand we go from a stage of, anabolism, we go from this anabolic state to a state that's more catabolic, breakdown state as those hormones, insulin and cortisol, increase as we get older. And the anabolic hormones, testosterone, DHEA, progesterone, decrease as we get older.
That's very interesting. And I'm kind of surprised you mentioned oxytocin. I think most people recognize insulin from diabetes and all that and cortisol because people just know corticosteroids and kind of have a sense of that. But oxytocin, how does that play into this? I mean, I think we kind of have a sense that this is the hormone that's associated with cuddling and all that. But maybe you can tell us a little more about oxytocin. How does that play a role?
This comes from my own personal experience with post-traumatic stress disorder, and also with working with patients in this time period and during and post-pandemic as well. This sense that when cortisol goes up, the hormone cortisol of stress, chronic everyday stress, post-traumatic stress, whatever it may be, perceived or real stress, when cortisol is, out of control, oxytocin goes down. So the hormone of connection, the hormone of healing, cortisol is an acidic hormone. Oxytocin is an alkalinizing, regenerative hormone, longevity hormone. We don't look at it that way, but it absolutely is. Every blue zone, the qualities of blue zones have higher oxytocin, stable marriages, laughter, spirituality, giving, community, all of those increase oxytocin and connection, lower cortisol. So when you're in that state where cortisol's up and oxytocin's down, or cortisol's up for too long of a time period, it gets suppressed. The paraventricular nucleus in the brain suppresses cortisol. And then you're in this dangerous state where cortisol's low and oxytocin's low at the same time. And so it's an inflamed state and it's a disconnected state. It's the physiology of burnout. It's the physiology of divorce. It's the physiology of isolation and depression.
I think my other hat I wear is in wound healing, and there is some evidence that oxytocin does play a role in literal wound healing. So thank you for bringing that little side into the story. I guess what our listeners are now saying, okay, so we figured out menopause, that's important, and it certainly plays a role and has to do with more than just the reproductive hormones. But how does that lead you to gain weight, lose weight? How does weight play a role here?
Yeah, and I think that's part of this hormonal hierarchy. So if I put it in this perspective too, again, oxytocin, the most powerful hormone in our body, then insulin and cortisol as weight regulating, metabolic regulating hormones, and then all our other hormones in the general student body. I like to say the hundreds of hormones in our body are like the students at a university. Everyone has its own giftings, its own drive its own roles and responsibility. But the professors of the university, that would be like insulin and cortisol. And then the dean of the university or the president of the university, and that would be like oxytocin. And you know, as well as I do, if you've got a professor and they're not in good health or they're drinking, they come into the classroom drunk and they just turn on a movie and sit in the back and veg out, you have
Sounds
disorder.
Yeah, disorder.
Disorder.
Yeah.
And that happens in our body too. So insulin resistance creates hormonal disorder, and cortisol dysregulation, circadian rhythm dysregulation, insomnia, not sleeping through the night, exhausted midday, tired and wired, all of those, that's cortisol or circadian rhythm dysregulation. That creates havoc in our body. And we get into this metabolic stall and this weight gain without doing anything different state. And I write about this specifically in my second book, Keto-Green 16, because I talk about 16 days into a keto-green lifestyle as simply as possible, but to really maximize getting insulin sensitivity and modulating cortisol and balancing our circadian rhythm. And that in and of itself just kind of turns back the hands of time.
Got it. So is it really just about the hormonal change that occurs that affects our behavior, hence how we eat and kind of the choices we make? Or does it really also affect how we absorb certain foods? And there's the whole concept of metabolism, slowing it down or making it go higher pace. Does it play a role in that sense as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about like cortisol, think about for a healthy complexion, you need healthy digestion, right? So,
Nice.
so the gut mucosa, you think about our membranes of the gut mucosa. If there's inflammation, you're going to have inflamed skin. It can show up as acne, eczema, aging, wrinkles, discoloration, all of those things. So, skin's a good reflection of what's happening on the inside. So if we think with cortisol, cortisol is a key disruptor of cell membranes. It creates the breakdown in the barrier to allow for zonulin to create disruption in the cell membranes and creating leaky gut, for instance. So that's going to create, again, inflammation, and inflammation and hormone imbalance are the reasons for the weight gain and the change in metabolism. So we look at it from that perspective, and that's why lifestyle and integrative health is so powerful to help reverse these changes. And they go hand in hand with mindset, mental attitude, positivity, and everything else that we can set our mind on for sure.
You've been a great champion of that. So thank you for helping us to think through kind of the problem, right? So we understand around menopause, there's some hormonal changes that definitely can play a significant role and effect on our diet and how we, that lead to weight changes, among other issues. I wanted to now maybe switch gears and talk about what can we do for that, right? And I think this is where people come to the doctor and say, hey, this is my situation. What can I do? And I guess the first question that comes into mind is, why the heck should diet affect hormones, right? If we have some imbalance, shouldn't we take that right hormone, kind of play, fire the dean, hire a new dean, put a new professor, do something in that crazy university to settle down everybody and get things in order? Why should we go the diet route?
Yeah, because that's the best regulator for the hormones, for sure. And I think that it's really, by example, I can tell you. So say, for example, my 52-year-old patient comes in and she goes, Dr. Ann, I've gained 20 pounds without doing anything different. And she's been on thyroid medicine. Immediately, when you have that weight gain, you think, okay, well, we got to fix your thyroid, right? But I mean, if that was the case, then everyone optimized on thyroid medicine would be thin, right? But it's not the case.
It is not. That's such a true observation. It is absolutely not. Yeah.
I know. I wish it was that simple, right? Like, oh my gosh, my life would be so much easier. So she comes in, you look at her labs, and I always would do, a full panel of blood work, look at hormones, look at a full thyroid panel, including TSH, free T4, free T3, reverse T3, and thyroid antibodies, thyroid peroxidase antibodies, and antithyroglobulin antibodies. So I look at those things for thyroid. I'm going to look at the next most important hormone, marker in the blood, and that's a vitamin D level. If vitamin D is low, I cannot optimize hormones. Oxytocin needs vitamin D receptors. Progesterone needs vitamin D receptors. Insulin needs vitamin D receptors. So you need vitamin D on board for our hormones to work. So that's critically important. The next thing that I'm going to look at is their inflammatory marker. So an HSCRP or cardiac CRP. I'm going to look at these inflammatory markers, how much, subclinical inflammation is going on. Of course, we can look from observation, but we're going to look at this lab. And then I'm going to look at their hemoglobin A1C. Well, how well is your hemoglobin A1C or your C-peptide and your HOMA-IR? What's going on with your real blood glucose metabolism? What's your fasting insulin level? So I'd like to look at those things too. And I look at those even as more important markers than the sex hormones. But next I'm going to look at DHEAS, progesterone, testosterone free and total, and estrogen. I will look at an estradiol and total estrogens and a sex hormone binding globulin. I also look at pregnenolone and a red blood cell magnesium. I mean, that is like part of my comprehensive panel. And so when you look at those things, you're like, okay, well, now I can see and track what gets measured, gets managed. I'm going to reduce inflammation, improve insulin sensitivity, and optimize adrenal function and support innate hormonal intelligence and regeneration and rejuvenation. And so you look at those things, and while I'm waiting for these labs to come back for that patient, I'll put her on my Keto-Green 16 detox. I'll put her on a combination of adaptogens. It's in my MightyMaca Plus. There's 30 superfoods, and many of them are adrenal adaptogens like maca, as well as turmeric, quercetin, resveratrol, and some greens, some enzymes. So that combined, I'll put her on that in part to support her detoxification pathways, and then bring her back in to go over those results. And typically, when she comes back in 3-4 weeks later, she's already 80-90% better, without prescribing anything. She's lost weight. She's less inflamed. She'll say this, and I've heard this over again: I didn't realize how bad I was feeling till I started feeling good again. That's powerful.
Right.
That's without a single prescription. Without a single prescription. And then I'm going to add on my prescriptions.
Right. No,
That's what I'm supposed to do, for heaven's sakes.
Right.
That's what I got triple boarded for.
Yeah, no, and it is true what you said about not knowing how bad you are until you start feeling better.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's the story with glasses, right? You don't know how much you're not seeing until you put on glasses. You're like, oh my gosh, I've been missing all of this. It's absolutely true, especially these kind of chronic eroding conditions that linger about. And I think for our listeners, I'll just clarify, MightyMaca is a superfood blend that you have on your website. And I guess it's a great opportunity to mention Dr. Anna's website, which is DR for Dr. AnnaCabeca.com. So that's easy, DrAnnaCabeca.com. And very useful website. You can browse there and see that and learn more about this particular supplement. And I also want to note that you mentioned vitamin D, which makes me feel great about people needing to have skin and vitamin D as part of this. So we feel that it is important. Now, you mentioned particular food. I know you mentioned keto as a way to go. Are you referring to the actual keto diet we know in pop culture as high fats kind of diet?
I call it Keto-Green because the goal is to get into ketosis periodically. And especially, honestly, in perimenopause and beyond, and andropause too, those of us over 50 are optimized when we bump into ketosis periodically. And that's giving us the opportunity to use fat for fuel, which helps us energetically at a higher vibration. It's a higher fuel source, but we can do it wrong easily, and we can get into a catabolic state versus an anabolic state. And especially as women and men have to do keto differently. And this is what I learned from my research and my own personal experience and experience with my patients, is that women, because we have 10 times less the testosterone than men, will get into a acidic state very quickly. And so then using our minerals from bones, muscle, etc., start breaking down in a very standard keto diet, which is a high fat, moderate protein, but very low carb. Those carbs we choose have to be rich in minerals, rich in alkalinizers, rich in fiber and fermented foods. So we get great nutrition. So the green part comes in because I started testing and had my patients test their urine pH. And a standard keto diet will make you very acidic, which in turn is going to increase your uric acid, which in turn will eventually slow down your metabolism and make you gain weight, even in a state of ketosis. The alkalinizing part comes from the greens. Then you're adding the minerals. So hence now in the keto communities, oh yeah, take mineral salts, take mineral salts. That's part of the reason for this. They recognize after a period of time that, even the highest carrying testosterone men, we're still getting into this inflamed state and this acidic state. So adding in the alkalinizers make a difference, but it's not just in the food is what I recognized is because as I did this and tested my urine every time I, used the restroom and had my patients do the same, when we did, we focus on the greens, the kale, the cruciferous vegetables for hormone, the fermented foods like sauerkraut and kimchi, and using these nutrients that we added on practice of gratitude, a prayer meditation practice, getting out in nature, we were more alkaline. Our urine pH was more alkaline all day. And it's renal physiology because cortisol increases hydrogen ions across the renal tubules and creates an acidic urine pH. So cortisol, again, is that robber that comes to break down the healthiest boundaries, the healthiest gates, and get into your garden and eat it, right? Affecting the cell membranes. So we have to really modulate cortisol by increasing oxytocin and doing practices that improve oxytocin and decrease cortisol, as well as the keto-green eating, right? And so with that, the food, like intermittent fasting, no more snacking. I just had for dinner smoked salmon. I wrapped it with a horseradish sauce and cassava flour tortilla and some greens and hot sauce because I'm in Texas. I love hot sauce. And why not, right?
Bring on the hot sauce.
Bring on the hot sauce. And that's a keto-green dinner. And so, but like intermittent fasting, no more snacking, ideally. And, I say you can feast 10% of the time, so go for it, right? But that type of nutrition is different than just a slab of meat or driving through. Right. I've heard one lecturer goes, yeah, just go through Whataburger and get 5 beef patties. I'm like, what else is in that beef patty? That is not healthy keto diet. I am sorry.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I wanted to ask you because a lot of times when patients ask me about keto diets and ketosis, what is a good source of fat? So that's the question. And I know there's some who feel that, especially when we talk about hormonal states, and that's true for actually hormonal-driven skin diseases that I see in my practice, like HS and acne. What is a good source of fat? Do you have any particular recommendation on that? For example, animal fat, which may then carry with it hormones that are used in the process of preparing this meat. Is there a difference there? Do you have any specific recommendation?
Yeah, definitely. There is a difference because you think that fat stores toxins. Our fat can be very protective. So if we're toxic, we can be storing fat or weight loss resistant because the fat, is protecting our body from the toxic release of substances. So that's number one. Same is true with animals. So grass-fed, grass-finished, free-ranged, low stress, all of that is as important for the animals we eat as it is for us. So, free range, wild caught, cold water salmon is a great source. And again, depending on where things are raised and where we receive them from, olive oils, nut oils, avocado, seeds are all beautiful sources. If we're not sensitive, eggs are a great source of healthy fats. So right. Between, the healthy food sources, protein sources, healthy sources of oils, avoiding any corn oil, we want to avoid artificial oils, we want to avoid margarines and all that stuff and rather eat the butter and the ghee. That's safer sources of fat for us.
Yes, thank you for clarifying this. I think it's very important, and people definitely ask those questions a lot. And I actually love the fact that you included that part about gratitude and having that spiritual part about your diet and how you approach your health, because I really feel that that makes a lot of difference. It also allows people to reflect, take time. It's not necessarily the time you would refer to an intermittent fasting, but it's just that extra moment to think about, okay, what is going into my mouth? Be more aware, more present in the moment, almost mindfulness kind of approach to eating, which I think is really, really important and helpful for those that like to do that. And talking about gratitude, I think it's a great place to stop here and express my gratitude for you, Dr. Anna Cabeca, for joining us today, talking about menopause and how to handle it. But I think, by the by, we learned a lot more about hormones in general and how to maybe tweak your diet and try to work with that to balance your hormones. Hey, everybody, just realize we are not done with Dr. Cabeca. If you're coming to Reno, and that's not just any time of the year, but actually on October 27th to the 29th to visit and be with us in the Integrative Dermatology Symposium, then you will be one lucky audience members to listen to Dr. Cabeca live. She's going to be there and be available to answer all your questions, and she's going to talk about topics that relate to what we talked about today, but much, much more. So, Anna, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your expertise. I think there's so much more to discuss, and we'd love to have you back for another episode. Thank you.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Guess what, Hadar?
What?
Tickets are selling so fast for the 6th Annual Integrative Dermatology Symposium.
Really? Wow, that's amazing. I mean, each time this event gets better and better.
Yes, it does. And as a special gift to our podcast listeners, all of you, we're offering 15% off registration using the code PODCAST15.
Podcast15 for 15% off. That's a great deal. And prices won't be going any lower this year, so hurry up and get that discount.
So true. And if you haven't joined us in person yet, we can't wait to see you. And this is the year to come have fun at the Grand Casino Resort in Reno, Nevada.
Yes, we are excited to see you, and together with Raja and myself and other practitioners, you will get to connect with everybody, engage with the exciting research and content, and learn what the integrative movement is all about as we get inspired by the Sierra Nevada mountain range and, my friend, downtown Reno.
All that nestling sounds fantastic. Dad joke alert, maybe even skin-tastic. I know we're all about having fun at the symposium, but this year's over the top. Now, I'm not much of a golfer, but for you golfers out there, they have over 40 courses, but they also have rock climbing, equestrian trails, boat tours, pools, arcades, and so much more to just relax.
Oh my gosh, this definitely sounds like a family-friendly getaway. I know I'm bringing the kids, and while they're at the movies, Raja, you and I, my friend, no pun intended here, but we'll be feasting on a lot of nutrition.
That's right. This year's theme has been long awaited. Nurse the gut, nurse the skin, and we'll be delving into nutrition.
Oh my gosh, we can't wait to see you. Come be with us at the IDS on October 27th to the 29th, in person or virtually. See you in Reno.